Welcome back to the Mom and Mind podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kat. On our episode today, we're joined by Alicia DeLori. She is sharing her experience with postpartum depression and a bit about how she got through it and got to the other side. What I really appreciate about some of the things that she talks about is the feeling of not being sure if her baby liked her in the very beginning. And I think a lot of people experience this. It's a brand new relationship. And if you've got sleep deprivation in the way, plus depression, sometimes that can result in feeling disconnection and not being able to really feel the connection that you want to feel. Also makes us like misinterpret how we are and who we are as new parents. So she shares a bit about that. And I also appreciate that she shares that she did sleep training with her daughter. And part of the reason that she did that was because of her own sleep deprivation and how much that impacted her. Unfortunately, as I'm sure you all know, there's so much like debate and back and forth about sleep training. And I appreciate when people talk about their choice to sleep train and how it benefited them, because there's typically so much out there now, especially in social media, about like quote unquote the right thing to do, or there's just too much pressure, man. Like if you figured out that there's something that you need to do for your health and your mental health that will benefit you and ultimately benefit your baby and your family, man, you should be able to do that without any backlash. That's, there's too much pressure. Parenting is too hard to have to deal with other people's intrusion on your life decisions. And that's my soapbox, and I'm sticking to it. So, anyhow, I really appreciate that Alicia brings that point in as well. Alicia is a mom, a freelance writer, editor, and content strategist, as well as the author of the Amazon military family bestseller, Something is Better Than Nothing. She has a 4-year-old daughter and is currently working on her second book. Let's meet Alicia. Thank you, Alicia, for being here. I'm really glad we could finally meet up and
I'm glad we
talk.
finally made it happen.
Right. It's a long time coming. Yeah, so please do start wherever you'd like with your experience.
Okay, so my daughter Lucy, who is about to start preschool in August, I had her in 2019, and she was my miracle baby. I had lost two before her.
Mm.
Um, and so that whole pregnancy was super nerve-wracking.
Right.
Um, and so I actually have health anxiety, and so when I was pregnant with this little human, that really ramped up. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
it impacted friendships. It was just a really trying time because anything could set me off if someone was sick near me, and this is pre-pandemic. So
Oh, right, right.
if I thought anybody was sick or coming near me, or I did have some spotting in the beginning, it was like a full-on meltdown. So I was not super, super fun to be around when I was pregnant.
Mm.
And then she was late and we gave birth at a birth center. And so I'm thinking it's going to be like those beautiful videos where like they're in the tub. I'm like, I'm going to have this beautiful tub birth. It's going to be so awesome. And unfortunately, just the way that was all panning out, I ended up on my back. I ended up screaming bloody murder. I had a birth photographer there and I was like, this is not going to be the tranquil,
Oh no.
beautiful video I
Right.
had. And so she finally made her way. I was in labor for like 55 hours. Um,
Oof.
and I think I was at the birth center for like 19. Um, and after that, I had like a little bit of bleeding, but at the time, because I am the way I am, I was like, oh my God, I'm dying. So, but because of their protocols, right? So at a birth center, there's very little room for like riding it out and seeing. So when certain things happen, they have to call in the ambulance. So I'm freaking out. Um, so actually, the first 2 hours I had Lucy, I was separated from her. The doula kept her at the birth center, and I went to the hospital where they were like, "You're fine. You just had a baby." Um,
Oh, I see. So the like concern or worry you had, or you felt that you could be dying because of the bleeding, and so they transported
yeah,
you.
yeah. So what ended up happening was,
Oh, okay.
I went to get food after. We're all sitting there, and they told me to get up and use the bathroom first. And when I went to get up, I was completely like I couldn't stand up. I had this weird dizziness. And then I remember her, and this is where I started to freak out. Chris had my husband Chris had Lucy. He was holding her. They laid me back down and they palpated my stomach and like just blood. And he went, and Chris is very calm, so he doesn't so all I heard was that, and in my mind, that sets me off like, oh,
Yeah,
like
that
I'm
was
there's
enough.
something bad's gonna happen, something bad's
Mm,
happening to me. So they're doing the protocol where they stop it. And again, I guess it just wasn't as dramatic as I was interpreting everything.
mm,
Um, but they were, moving quickly. They do the Cytotec to get you to contract and get the bleeding to stop. They're taking my vitals, and of course, when I'm freaking out, you're not going to be able to get the vitals under control.
right.
Um, and so because they couldn't get the vitals under control, then they got to initiate that protocol
Hmm.
where they have to call the ambulance. And meanwhile, I'm freaking out. I'm like, this is
Yeah.
it for me. Like they're gonna do this alone. Um, and when I get to the hospital, they're like, I mean, you're just not bleeding that much. And they're doing chest X-rays and everything else. I'm
Just
crying.
like
I'm
just to
begging
make
my
sure.
mother. Yeah,
Okay. Hmm.
and I'm crying. I'm begging my mother to come see me. Um, and come to find out, Chris was he's like, I made that noise just because I was surprised. I wasn't scared or anything. Um, so what really wasn't a big deal and what was like kind of more protocol than anything. I now know that that's what that was, but in that moment, you couldn't have told me that. In that moment, I was like, oh my God,
Oh, okay.
this is it for me. And because when I was pregnant too, you're Googling all the stuff that can happen, like all
Hmm.
kinds of wackadoos.
Hmm.
I'm like, I can't
Hmm.
drink this. Hibiscus can cause this weird off the wall thing. And um, so all worst case scenarios, I was very aware of.
Mm.
I remember going to the birth center. They said, "What's your fear?" I'm like, bleeding to death. And they're like, "We've literally never had anybody come in and say
Oh.
that." Uh,
Oh,
so it was just, it was like a hypochondriac's like worst case scenario, right?
I see. Yeah.
Even though, because I would go, I'd be like, oh, I hemorrhaged, I almost died, and my mother would be like, you had some bleeding, you're okay. That you had some bleeding, it's okay.
Oh gosh. Right. Well, that speaks to how heightened the anxiety was.
It super, yeah,
Oh, so high.
and they tell you that you forget immediately, and you'll want the second one. That experience is still very present with me. I
Uh-huh.
did not forget.
Right.
Um, so even though it was one thing, it felt like another, and I'm not
Mm.
sure that I have what's left. I'm not sure I have anything left to kind of put towards feeling that again,
Oh,
even
sure.
knowing what I
Right.
know now, because I know what it feels like versus what it actually is.
All
Um,
right. Sure.
and it's just scary stuff.
So
And
like
she had,
logically you kind of you get it, you understand, but
right.
emotionally it's like way too
Yeah.
overwhelming. Hmm.
Yeah. Even now I have to go see someone about a knee MRI I had. And logically, I know I probably have like cartilage damage because I weightlift and all this stuff. But that emotional part is
Mm.
still super anxious
Yeah.
and running through all the worst case scenarios. So
Right.
it's very hard to become a parent when you are like that. Back then, I
Hmm.
didn't know like I was like a diagnosed person with health anxiety. People
Mm.
used to just kind of make fun of me and tell me I'm a hypochondriac. Um, but now knowing what I know now, it's adding a kid on top of those types of fears is very, very, very tough.
Yeah.
And
Right.
I just remember buckling her into that car seat once we were back from the hospital. We're leaving the birth center because you don't hang out there like you would when you give birth in a hospital.
Hmm.
And we put her in the car seat and we looked at each other and go, what do we do now?
Hmm.
Um, I've that's terrifying. And I've talked to other first time parents too, and they're like, yeah, it's very surreal having this little person in a car seat, and you're just wondering, okay, what do we do with it when we get home? Like,
Right. Right.
what do our days look like now? So that was super scary.
Yeah.
Um, and then so now I have this like health anxiety for myself, but now I've got another little person, and that is just times a million.
Like
Um,
health anxiety for her or
yes. So
oh,
then you
okay.
worry about every sneeze or
Oh,
every
right.
weird noise she
Mm,
makes, or I just remember like Googling the color of her poop. Chris being
mm-hmm,
like, no, it's okay.
mm-hmm.
Um, Calling the doctor for every little thing, and yeah, it was an adjustment because now it's I'm always freaking out about me, but now I've got something new to worry about.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course we went into the pandemic right before she turned 1. But
Yeah.
yeah, so just as I'm coming off the tail end, because I had terrible postpartum, just as I'm like starting to feel normal again, it's like, oh, there's this new virus. We're gonna
Right.
have to quarantine. Um, it was just a very surreal time in my life. I just remember um, right after she was born, I mean, she had a tongue, both lip and buccal ties,
Mm.
and they said they'd never seen a kid with all five.
Oh,
So they had to do a tongue tie release, but lips and buckles and all that. And I had D-MER, which I had never heard of in my life.
oh,
Um,
that's a rough thing to find out about.
it was very weird to be breastfeeding and all of a sudden just be have this weird feeling of doom come over you, like it was like the verge of panic, that moment before you have a panic attack.
Yep.
Every time I breastfeed, and I was like, what is wrong with me? Because I did not know that was a thing. My midwife didn't know it was a thing. It was the lactation consultant who pointed it out and said, no, this is a thing. And it
Mm-hmm.
sounds exactly like what you have. Um, and so I actually had to stop nursing at 3 weeks because there was something about holding your kid and having those feelings
Yeah.
that created this massive disconnect
Yeah.
between the two of us. And I was very surprised that with all my Googling and all of my different scenarios, I never came across it. But it is not something I've heard of. And most women I have spoken to about it have not heard of it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I switched to pumping. And
I'm just gonna pause here for people who don't know what it is.
oh, yeah,
Dysphoric milk ejection reflex.
yeah.
So, right, just as you were describing, as soon as you have like let down and you start
Hmm.
nursing, you feel horrible. Um,
Yep. And it's physiological. So there's
right.
nothing, you can't like therapize yourself out of it. It's
Mm-hmm.
just a weird dopamine shift. Um, at least that's how it was explained to me. It's an irregularity in your dopamine when you let down, right? And it messes with you.
You get messed
Um,
up. Yep.
yeah. And so it would still happen when I pumped, and I was pumping 8 to 12 times a day, but it was better in the sense that it wasn't happening while I was holding my kid.
Mm-hmm.
And that little shift made it a lot easier to bond with Lucy because
Yeah.
I just remember crying to the doctor, be like, my kid does not like me.
Oh,
I don't
oh,
think
that's
this
so
baby
horrible.
likes me. Um, and I had a really great lactation consultant. She would come to, she'd be like, she's 3 weeks old. She doesn't know what she likes. She just knows, um, she knows your voice and she knows you feed her and she likes you about as much as she can like anything right now. Um, but yeah, that D-MER stuff is wild. Absolutely, I'd never heard of that in my life.
Right. So with like the health anxiety running in the background now, you have this brand new thing to be worried about. Um, and this is almost right away.
Yeah, it was right away. I just because I would sit there on the couch and I'd be talking, and all of a sudden, you feel it in your stomach. It's this, when you all of a sudden you're really really frightened over something, and you get that tingle in your stomach. Um, and it would come out of nowhere, and it would take me by surprise. And I kind of just pushed it away the first time because I wasn't feeling great after I got home.
Right.
I had diastasis, so that ab
Mm.
separation. It was 4 fingers wide, so
Oh,
I even had to like brace my stomach when I coughed or sneezed, and that was um. So I was out of the gym for the foreseeable future till we fixed
yeah.
that. So I just thought that was all part and parcel of the immediate postpartum stuff, but then it kept happening, and I thought there was something wrong with me.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was sleep deprivation, or I thought it was postpartum depression kicking in, and sure there was some of that, and that started to ramp up too. But this was like a whole other thing. So it was this
Yeah.
massive snowball of different things that I didn't realize could hit you all at once.
Mm-hmm.
Um, on top of just having a baby is super hard.
Right.
Um, yeah, both Chris and I would look at each other and be like, I had no idea it was going to be, no idea.
Right. It's like theoretical. And people can tell you it's hard, but until you're
Yeah.
in it, you
I mean,
just,
yeah, it wasn't for lack of people telling us, but I remember when I was pregnant and I'd be like, a lot of people in our family had kids. It can't be that hard. Um, it's, and I ate those words as soon as I had them.
mm,
Um, I had no idea it's constant 24/7 of, I have no idea what I'm doing right
mm-hmm.
now. And if someone would ask me how she is, I'm like, well, I mean, she's still alive, so I guess I'm doing a decent job. And I had some really supportive girlfriends who were like, yeah, that's all you need to do. That's all you need to do right
Nice.
now.
Nice. Good. Glad you had that. It's hard to believe, but it's nice to hear, have that support.
Yes.
So you
And even
had
if you
you
don't believe it.
oh right, even if you don't believe it.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that postpartum depression sort of came along at some point. What was your
Yeah.
timeline
So
trajectory?
I'm dealing with the D-MER. I'm paranoid over this little person 24/7 because of course you Google things like SIDS and everything, and oh, they can't tilt their head a certain way because it'll cut off their airway. So I've got that going on all day. I've got the D-MER going on all day, and this kid is not sleeping. So I'm up for like days at a time with this kid, and then I can't do the things that I used to do. So I'm really CrossFit is like not just my workout, but it's where my community is. All my friends go there. So now I'm kind of separated from this until I can resolve what's wrong with my body. And I just remember the first day where it really hit me that I there's something not right here. I remember waking up crying, and she had just woken up, and Chris comes in, and I was like, what if this is as good as it gets?
Oh, yeah.
What if this is as good as it gets? Is this our life? Like, is this
Oh
going to be our
no.
life now?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and he was really concerned because he'd never heard me speak that way.
Mm,
Um, I just, I have never felt that hopeless, but in a way that I couldn't articulate because I had
mm,
this kid and I loved my baby, and I knew that whatever was happening to me was temporary. I knew I would resolve um, and this is the part where I always felt really lucky, even in the midst of that. I knew that the issues with my body and not being able to do the things I wanted, that was only temporary, and
mm.
that it was just another project I would. And
Oh,
I knew at some point she would sleep, and I knew at some point we would be out of the newborn stage, and I would get the hang of this at some point. But in that moment, each day I just felt like I don't feel any hope right now. I know there
that's
is some, but I don't feel it, and it feels so impossible to even visualize or fathom.
mhm.
And it felt really, really joyless and
Yeah,
lonely.
right. Right. I mean, it's really tough when we're talking before a little bit about kind of the split, so to speak, between what you kind of logically maybe know and what you emotionally are experiencing. Man, when those are at odds, it's emotions win out often.
All the
Uh,
time,
it's tough.
every
It's tough
time.
to like try and convince yourself out of the intensity of the emotional space you're in.
Yes. And And again, so I went to, I think it was Postpartum International. We had the Climb Out of the Darkness walk.
Nice.
And I was really just in the thick of everything, but we went and the counselor there, she was my counselor while I was pregnant, and she asked me to speak. And I remember standing up there and saying, like, I don't recognize my body. I don't recognize my life. I love my kid and I know my life is better with her in it, but also right now it feels a little bit like it's worse.
Hmm.
Um, and at the end, I remember saying, I feel really lucky because in far in the back of my head, I know that this is temporary and in a year from now, things are going to look different.
Hmm.
And I think there are a lot of women who it's a lot harder for that thought in the back of their mind to even be present.
Right.
So I remember feeling really fortunate because I was like, this sucks, but this is not going to get to a place where it's really, really scary.
Mm.
But I can see how it can.
Right.
Because even that little thought, I was clinging to that with everything I had because it's so hard to
Mm.
fathom that there is that light. I knew it was there,
Mm.
but I could not visualize the light at the end of that tunnel.
Mm. That is incredibly tough. So you're at this point, like at the time of the climb, how far along out of postpartum?
I was
Sorry, post birth.
3 months, 3 months. So Lucy was about 3 months old, and I remember walking outside and talking to other moms, and one was telling me how she actually had to go away for a little while with, I think it was her second kid. I don't even think it was her first. Um, saying that it's good to talk about because she didn't talk to anyone
Mm.
and ended up in that place having to explain to her older child, like, mommy has to go away for a bit.
Hmm.
And so again, it just felt really good because when all that was going on, I had a hard time leaving the house. I would go grocery shopping, and if Lucy would start crying, I would just abandon my cart. I There was something that I felt really, really overwhelmed when she would start crying in public
Right.
that I would just leave. Um, and I didn't have my gym every day, so it was a lot of me alone a lot of the time, which, you know, anytime you're depressed or sad or hurting, it all thrives in isolation.
Yep.
So to hear other people saying like this is normal, and when I'm saying, I kind of feel like my life's been ruined a little bit because everything is just so upended.
Hmm.
um they're like, yeah, no, that's normal. That's normal because it is kind of ruined a little bit, but it's just because you don't know how to navigate it yet. And so it was just really comforting to know, okay, I'm not alone in this,
Hmm.
and a lot of these women seem really happy now, so I'll probably be okay, just not right now.
Right. Right. You have to have something to hold on to. I'm glad you had a bit of that. It was like, how long for you did this go on? The intensity of overwhelm.
I would say it probably started to let up at about 5 months when I had had enough of the sleep deprivation because um I was already pretty fragile emotionally, and when you add in sleep deprivation, I'm like, okay, this is gonna get to the scary place if I can't, and my kid wasn't sleeping. So my sister gave me this book that she had tried with her kids. I tried it with mine, and again, I understand that I have like a really awesome unicorn baby. This kid sleep trained like a pro. I mean, that first night she cried, I think it was like 20 minutes. The second night, like 10. By the third or fourth night, my kid's sleeping through the night. We're doing naps, and I feel like I woke up from a coma.
Oh, right.
And so now I've got clarity and I can start doing my work in a timely fashion because I never took any time off of freelancing when I had her. So it was a lot of stop, start, stop, start.
Oh
So something
gosh.
that would normally take me an hour was taking 3 or 4 hours, and I'm having to sit by my computer with a notepad to log the times that I'm working, like, so it'd be like 7 minutes because I didn't want to overcharge anyone, but that was the only way I could even keep my time at that point. So I was starting to come out of my haze and be able to work more efficiently and to juggle my day more efficiently.
Hmm.
Um, to kind of get myself together, be like, okay, so here's my next steps I have to get into pelvic floor therapy. I have to resolve this diastasis because I'm just going to keep sitting here in this place.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and at that point too, I was really, really paranoid about not pumping enough for her. Um,
Okay.
and at a certain point, I had to let that go because that in and of itself was driving me nuts. So I slowly started adding in formula.
Like it became
And
another part of your anxiety
right, because I'm like, oh, I
playing
can't
out.
even produce enough for my kid. This is something that should be really intuitive. This is my body was designed for this. Why
Ouch.
isn't that happening? That anxiety felt really similar to how I felt about my body after miscarrying. Like, this is the one thing my
Mm.
body was designed to do.
Okay.
Why isn't it working the way it's like? What's wrong with me? Am I not trying hard enough? Am I not? Um,
That sucks.
And I mean, Chris and I would talk about it. We would go to therapy together. That therapist said, I really think you should consider um, adding in formula and getting some of your life back here.
Mm.
Because it's however it's benefiting Lucy, it's hurting you a lot more than it's helping her, and she'll be fine either way. And when I
Mm-hmm.
finally caved on that, the first day I feel terrible. It feels like a personal failure. But then after a few days, when your kid's literally the same and nothing has changed and they're still thriving, and you have your body back to yourself, and all of a sudden it's one less thing that you're thinking about 24/7.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I did come around to the idea that fed is best and
Mm-hmm.
she'll be okay. And
Mm-hmm.
I was okay. And so
Mm-hmm.
it really came down to self-care without feeling bad about it. Because I did notice a lot of the older women in my family and my life when I would share these thoughts I'm having, where I'm like, my life kind of sucks right now, and it feels like no one really gives a crap about me. Once she's out, no one cares if I'm getting sleep or I'm healthy or I'm happy, or it's all about the kid. And a lot of and I think too, a lot of this just has to do with being a product of your generation. I think it's a generational
Mm-hmm.
saying, what about you? Motherhood's selfless. It's not for everybody. She's healthy and happy. That's all you should care about.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and when I started to prioritize myself a little, I was better for her because
Right.
I'm no good to my kid if I'm sitting there wondering if this is as good as it gets. I'm no good to
Right.
her, sleep deprived. I'm no good to her if I'm sitting there feeling really bitter that my life got put on hold and that all of the things I wanted for myself now don't matter anymore.
Right.
And you see that. I mean, I've seen that in my own family where women have given up so much,
Right.
and but they don't let anyone forget it. And I never wanted to be like
Oh
that.
gosh. I hear you. Got it.
I never wanted my kid to see herself as like a speed bump or like I had to take a detour. I want her to know that she was something that I wanted,
Mm-hmm.
someone I wanted, that I love, and that
Mm-hmm.
she was a really great addition to an already really complete person.
That's
Um,
lovely.
So once I started doing that, I remember one night I was feeding her a bottle and I submitted my manuscript. I saw one of the smaller presses that I followed was taking manuscript submissions. And I had a finished manuscript. I just hadn't done anything with it. And I was like, what's the worst they can say? No. So I remember submitting that while sitting in her room one night. I was like, let's just do this. Let's be hopeful again. Let's
That's
do all the
cool.
things that we were looking forward to before.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they accepted it, so
That's
yay.
awesome.
So,
Yeah. How
but yeah,
nice.
prioritizing that time, getting my body back to where it needed to be, um, taking that time each week, taking the time to do my work, making sure my kid is sleeping, which people always gave me crap because she had to cry it out in the beginning. Um, my kid was getting 20 to 40 minutes of broken sleep in like spurts.
Oh, that's
And
really
I'm like, well, I feel like it's a lot more unhealthy for her to get broken bouts of sleep than it is to cry for, 14, 15 minutes.
mm-hmm.
Um, which didn't last long. And again, I understand that is not the norm. Just like, knock on wood, my kid has slept every night since, and she's
Mhm.
4 now. She's sleeping right now for her nap. It's amazing. Um, but that sleep, I didn't realize how close my sanity was tied to like my level of sleep
Right.
until, because I was like, oh, I've been tired before. I used to have to get up early for it. There's no way to imagine that tiredness. There is no way to
Yeah.
convey that exhaustion to anybody who
It's
hasn't been
so
there.
different. Yeah, it is so different.
Um, and also the stakes are higher. So had I been that sleep deprived before? Yes, but the stakes weren't as high. Being late for work early in the morning and like a human depending on you for survival, and
Totally
again,
different.
that all contributes to the anxiety that you're plopping on top of. Um,
Yeah, that's such a great way to put it. It's so real. So right. So the shift is really profound. And it doesn't sound like, in the scheme of things, I guess it doesn't sound like it took too long for you to get a little bit of yourself like back
yeah,
and online, and um that the sleep obviously was a
yeah,
big
I
part of
think the
that.
sleep is always the catalyst, right? If you
Hmm.
have a rested mind, it's easier to see a path.
Hmm.
And so, thank God, because the pandemic followed pretty soon after that.
All right.
Um,
So you had started feeling better, and then the pandemic happened, and
yeah, so
then
I'm back in the gym. I had worked through my pelvic floor therapy, which is super tedious. It's so tedious. Um, I'm back in my gym. I'm back in my community. My baby's at my gym with me. It's everything that I had envisioned when I was pregnant.
mm,
And then now we're going into quarantine. And again, I, I saw the movie Contagion. That thing is terrifying. That movie
right,
terrified me. And I'm
right.
like, oh my God. And so I didn't leave my house until this last September. Um, and it was because I had her. Um,
Hmm.
my number one thing was, okay, the only thing that matters is protecting this kid.
Hmm.
And all of that withdrawal from people, then, I'm then having to venture out because I see myself going back into that place
Sure.
of like, okay, what if this is as good as it gets? I'm hiding here with my kid. And I remember I reached this breaking point where I was like, okay, I have to get a physical. I haven't had a physical in years, and there's something, I'm feeling hopeless again up here, and I
Mm.
haven't felt that in so long. And so I went, and I remember telling them, I'm like, in my family, we look differently on medicating. So the whole time I was pregnant, like seeing a therapist, even after the postpartum, like, are you sure you don't want to try? It will help. And I said, no. Um, there's just a certain stigma in my family that was ingrained into me that,
Hmm.
doing that is taking some sort of easy way out. But I remember at that point, I was like, it's not about me anymore.
Oh, right.
And I am tapped out, and everything I have left is going to Lucy. And I'm not sure how much more I've left when I've not left my house, and I'm scared 24/7 for the
Oh, that's
kid.
so
Um,
painful.
and I remember they put me on some anxiety meds, and I remember talking to my sister about it, and she's like, you've been told your whole life that anxiety is like your character flaw. She's like, did you ever consider that maybe you're just wired that way and it's a medical condition like anything else that we need to? And I was like, that makes me feel so much better. And a few weeks in, I was like, hey, I don't have that weird sinking feeling in my stomach anymore
Oh my
that
gosh.
I wake up with every day. I was like, and my sister's like, yeah, that's what it feels like to feel normal. And I said, I thought that was normal, to just be low key worried at any given time. So for me, stress was when that feeling amps up, right? And you
Yeah,
start to
yeah,
feel
yeah.
nauseous and jittery. But for me, default or in my default state, it was normal for me to always feel either a low key sense of worry or this just kind of caution,
Hmm.
proceeding with caution within
Hmm.
every day at any given period of time.
Mm.
And so it was a very weird feeling not to have it anymore.
Wow. That is really profound, for that shift to happen.
Yeah. And
And
it's
that
very
it
weird to feel it after 34 years. I'm like, I could have felt like this forever. and and
mm,
I've done therapy and stuff, so it's not that I really was convinced my whole life that if I was feeling this way, it's because I wasn't working on myself.
oh, oh, that's brutal. Right, because
But
then if that's the feeling, then it's also inherently shaming.
right.
Like
So
it's
it's
because of
also
you don't
it's a
feel better.
character flaw.
Ugh,
I Yeah, so I don't have anxiety. I'm anxious and I need to do something.
that is a really important distinction.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking of so many people who are going to really gain a lot from hearing your story who have a similar experience to you, who've been told that this is just how they are, and who family like it's interesting too because anxiety also can make you fear medication
hmm
in a certain way, and
And
like the thing
I've
that could
always
help
been
you.
afraid. I've always been afraid of pills just in general. Again, I'm paranoid. So like any story of like, oh, I heard someone took this, and anytime I've ever been prescribed a painkiller, I never took it. I'm just afraid of it.
Hmm.
But I remember, like, again, my sister is the best person I know. So to
Hmm.
have her and I have this discussion, a lot of times she'll be like, well, what if Lucy was feeling this way and she went to get medicine? What would you say to her? Tell her she's not trying hard enough? And I'm like, well, as a mom, I would just want her to have relief, whatever that looks like. And if there was a way for her to not feel this every day, I would want her to not feel that.
Right,
Um,
right.
so I was like, the best thing I can do is help me, as we've seen, because there's a history of it now. The better I am, the better I am for her.
For
Um,
sure.
and so we did that, and then I did end up having to take Lucy. She's an OT, PT, and speech now. Um, Mostly from just that lack of socialization. But
Oh,
again,
during the pandemic, right?
yeah, but again, when my mind is right, I can see a path forward. And
Hmm.
so, we still do we still mask, and there are things I put her in this outdoor activity thing where I could feel comfortable and get her out and give her what she needs while at the same time still feeling comfortable and like I'm being protective of her
Hmm.
and safe. So everything we do is always with her safety in mind. So we're back in the gym, but our gym is a big open 10,000 square foot warehouse with bay doors open. And so finding that the way to kind of function in this new normal without me feeling like I'm compromising our safety in any way.
Hmm.
But again, had I not taken the step to kind of remedy some of that anxiety, which it's always there, that um I can at least look at it. My rational mind can prevail a lot more now.
Yeah.
And so I can find a way for us not to be hiding in our house 24/7,
Hmm.
um, taking care of me and taking care of her.
Right. Right.
Because I've already noticed how much I've changed just from getting to go to the gym a few days.
Right. I mean, it does do wonders. I mean, changing your environment and being around other people and the socializing and all of that.
And
I
it's
mean,
not the same where I built a home gym in my garage during the pandemic. It's not the same. You don't get the same endorphin high. It's not, and
mm,
I, doing all the same stuff, all things created equal. I need the community.
right. Right. That's pretty powerful. So throughout this whole process, I guess, from the time you had her to the time you got medication, what was the time amount of time?
So I got medicated in July of 2021. So my daughter was about 2.
Mm-hmm.
So that whole first year in the pandemic, it was just kind of white knuckling through the year.
Yeah.
trying to keep this kid safe. I was the person disinfecting the groceries, all that. Um, and just at a certain point when you don't have exposure to the outside world and you're constantly like I was constantly worried her dad was going to bring something home to us. Um, it just became too much.
Right. And I've heard if also from a lot of people who were experiencing this, like having children during the pandemic and having the heightened anxiety, is that once people started to go outside, um, what they thought was going to be outside and how sort of society was going to be was kind of different from what they had in their mind, like in their anxious and worried um, headspace. It was going to be more dangerous, or there was going to be more threats or like more challenges or whatever. And then when they got outside, there was yes certain things that still needed to be worked out, like how are they going to navigate certain situations, but it was almost like they could see that some of the things that they were worried about were worries. And some of the things that they were concerned about were, yeah, still things we need to consider.
Right. Yep. Um, I remember that first year of the pandemic, we did take her to a pumpkin patch because I was like, okay, outdoors, safe. Um, and I just remember anytime I would see another human, like my heart would jump up into my throat because,
Hmm.
and Chris was like, you might have a little bit of agoraphobia from staying in the house so long.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and so, but again, we're there. I'm getting all paranoid, but at the same time, people are not coming up in my bubble.
Right.
It was really easy to experience that in a safe way that I was comfortable with.
Hmm.
And so that's just kind of like exposure. So I anytime I could do an activity like that, I was doing. Um, and people are pretty respectful if you don't want them in your space. I'll give them that. But it took a lot of learning that I could move about the world the way it is right now in a way that made me comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. And the difficulty about that is similar to like you don't know until you're going through it. How difficult having a baby is. You don't know what's going to work and what's not going to work until you go out.
Oh yeah, it's always trial and error. And the things that, like the things you think you're not gonna do as a parent, you end up doing.
Mm.
It's just I was such a better parent before I had kids. I had it all figured out.
Yeah.
Um, and, and then you just become the mom who gives her kids nuggets and fries, and that's fine, and she's fed and alive, and it's
Right.
great. Everyone's happy.
Right. Someday there will be a vegetable. Um, yeah. Yeah, for sure. I know recently you were able to do a TED Talk about your experience. Can you say more about that and how that was for
Yeah,
you?
yeah. So originally I was supposed to give that TED Talk in 2020, and my daughter wasn't even one yet, and so it was very much on the side of like, hey, I just got done with this postpartum thing, and here's what happened. Um, and I finally was able to give this talk in April, and Lucy had just turned 4, and so what I really wanted to focus on was a little bit of that postpartum piece, uh, um, but more so how we as moms can unapologetically take up space.
Mm,
So instead of just putting together all of the great experiences and outings and stuff where we end up not even in the pictures
mm,
after,
mm.
that we actually have the expectation of being able to enjoy it just as much as everyone else does.
Yeah.
And not falling into that being the default parent in all situations, even when your partner is around, somehow everything defaults to you. And I don't think
Mm,
it's anyone's fault so much as I think it just is ingrained. I think
mhm.
it's an expectation. Like somewhere along the way, we expected that dads were going to do the bare minimum, and anything above that, oh my gosh, he's such an involved dad.
Mhm, mhm.
Um, And the bar is so much higher for us, and wanting more for ourselves apart from our kids um, is okay and shouldn't be seen as selfish. So I really just wanted to impart that on my daughter. Again, she
Yeah.
should be an addition to my life rather than, I never want her to see her as anything that ever held me back. I don't want her to see her children that way.
Yeah.
Or feel like wanting stuff for herself even after your kids are here is somehow wrong or selfish. I mean, you can still continue on the path that you had for yourself and your life and your goals
Mm-hmm.
and still be a great mom.
Yeah. Oh, that's such an important message, and I feel like sort of sea change messaging that hopefully more people are catching on to, because it is, to your earlier point, I think like a shift in motherhood and what was expected of sort of moms and parents in the past is very different now of what's possible for us as opposed to what's expected.
I mean, I still catch myself, like, even when Chris is here, asking if he minds if I hop in the shower or go to the bathroom.
Right.
But, like, he's here.
Right.
And he's not asking me to go to the bathroom. He's not
No.
asking me
Hmm.
to go get his hair cut. Meanwhile, he needs 2 weeks notice from me if I have a doctor's appointment. Um,
Yeah.
just the subtle little things like that. Like, he can move about a little more freely than I can. And I've tried explaining this. I'm like, I am the default parent in all situations. Even when all things are created equal and we are both home and we have no work to do, it defaults to me. If she's like, "Hey, I'm hungry," and we're both sitting here, who's the first one to get up and get her something?
Right.
Um, and it's undoing that and expecting to be treated the same way that everyone else is. Expecting him to extend the same courtesy to me as he
Hmm.
would to anyone.
Hmm.
Um, and expecting me to just shoulder 100% even when he's here is not extending the same courtesy to me as he
Right.
would to anyone else.
Right,
And
for
that's a
sure.
big part of taking care of yourself. It's expecting that from other people and expecting that for yourself, because I think somewhere along the way we stop expecting.
Totally. Yeah. I mean that these are really important points. Um, and the that your partner, your husband in your case is also having to make a change from, I assume, from what he saw growing up, and like we're all trying, what a great word you use, to undo all of this
Yeah,
conditioning.
because even like the older members of our family, I remember complaining about something. It wouldn't even matter what I was complaining about. And I would get, well, your dad never even changed a diaper. Like,
Mm.
grandpa never did this. And
Hmm.
it's like, they should have. Like,
Right, right.
but they should have.
Right. Yeah. Or so, right. It's
It
almost
wasn't
telling you.
okay for you. It's not, it's not okay for me.
Right.
And
Yeah.
maybe they thought it was never okay. It's just
Hmm.
the way it was.
Right. Right. Well, that is a necessary part of the conversation, moving forward and moving families forward. It's so incredibly important. I'm really glad you were able to finally do that. What a long time you had to wait. Um,
Yeah, it took some tweaking, because me then and me now, it's a little different.
sure.
But honestly, I was glad that I had that perspective. So I think in the end, it ended up a
Hmm.
lot better
Hmm.
just from that time.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate you coming on to share your story and your
Thank you for having me.
experience and all that you've, learned and are learning and are like really using your experience, put you through quite a lot, and it sounds like you're sort of back to yourself, in the ways that you really wanted to be. That's awesome.
Thank you. I'm glad to
Yeah.
be back.
Right. Right. Well, thank you for sharing your time with us and your experience.
Thank you.
You can connect with Alicia at aliciadelory.com. You can connect with her on Instagram and Facebook at Alicia Delory Author. as well as on TikTok at Alicia D. Reads and Writes. She also did a TED Talk, and I will have the link connected in our show notes for you to look at that as well. I'd also love for you to check out the course that I created for new moms who are newly in the postpartum period and are specifically looking for therapy, having a hard time connecting with a therapist, or just need a little bit of guidance themselves during those first few months. The course is designed to help you understand what is going on, give you some tools to help deal with how you're feeling, and be accessible and available to you whenever you need at all hours of the day because it's online and on demand. Go to wellmindperinatal.com/courses to learn more. Thank you so much for being with us. Until next time.